He's a thug and a bad guy. He's making a lot of drugs. He's a bad guy and he's hurt his country very badly. They're doing very poorly, coca. These words from Donald Trump were not aimed this time at the Venezuelan dictator, Nicolás Maduro, but at Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro. Yes, the president of a country that, until now, had been considered one of the United States' closest allies in Latin America. But as we've been saying for a while, things in the Caribbean are literally on fire. Anything can change overnight. And these words have shaken Colombia on far beyond like an earthquake. Up to now, Trump's main enemy was clear: Maduro, the Venezuelan dictator who, according to Washington, leads the Cartel of the Suns, a full-fledged narco-terrorist network. The White House has been taking increasingly bold actions, such as bombing vessels in international waters, accused of serving narco-terrorist operations. Now Trump has doubled down, sending none other than the USS Gerald R. Ford, the crown jewel of U.S. aircraft carriers, along with its strike group, to patrol the Caribbean. What few expected was for this escalation to extend far beyond Venezuela and now directly involve Colombia and its president. The reason? Accusations that President Gustavo Petro is collaborating with drug trafficking. And this isn't about personal consumption, as his former foreign minister, Alvaro Leiva, once accused without evidence. It's something far more serious. The United States has sanctioned Colombia's president for alleged involvement in narco-trafficking. It started with a warning. Washington removed Colombia from its list of allies in the fight against drugs, something that had happened since 1997, but the real blow came afterward. Gustavo Petro, his wife, his eldest son, and his interior minister, Armando Benedetti, have all ended up on the Clinton list. And no, that's not a Netflix series. It's a very real blacklist. It includes individuals and entities that, according to the US, are terrorists, profit from dictatorships, or traffic, or collaborate with narcotics networks. What does this mean? Essentially, they are prohibited from doing business with US companies or citizens, and the US Treasury is authorized to freeze any assets they might hold in American territory, similar to what was done with Russian oligarchs after the invasion of Ukraine. Now, Petro finds himself on the same list as figures like Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, Iran's state oil company, and Russia's Gazprom, and there's more. Shortly before landing on this list, Petro's US visa was revoked. Why? Because of his public calls for US soldiers to disobey Trump's orders amid a wave of pro-Palestinian protests. Beyond the open hostility between Gustavo Petro and Donald Trump, the key question is, what's behind all these sanctions? It's certainly Petro's guerrilla past doesn't help, but the real answer lies in Caracas. Although Colombia doesn't officially recognize Maduro as Venezuela's legitimate president, Petro has become one of the strongest defenders of Chavismo in Latin America. Not even Lula da Silva has gone that far. Every time Washington moves against Maduro, Petro protests, condemns, and demands the sanctions be lifted. Whether or not he personally likes Maduro is unclear, but one thing is certain: he dislikes his actions even more. Petro has praised Maduro, calling him a statesman working to move Venezuela away from oil dependence, and even a fighter against climate change. Meanwhile, he has harshly attacked Maria Corina Machado, the Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize recipient, calling her a traitor. Ironically, he's not entirely wrong about Venezuela moving away from oil, though not for the reasons he imagines. Still, the central issue remains. The US sanctions are not just because Petro supports Chavismo diplomatically, but because Washington suspects he's actively aiding the drug trade on the side of the traffickers. To be fair, there's no conclusive evidence yet, but plenty of reasons for suspicion. Cocaine, a drug long associated with Colombia, is booming again worldwide. In 2023, 25 million people consumed it globally, up from 17 million a decade earlier. Production rose 34% since 2022. Colombia now dedicates an estimated 250,000 hectares to coca cultivation, the raw material for cocaine, which is processed and shipped through Venezuela, Brazil, and Ecuador to reach global markets. Worse yet, production keeps growing. In 2012, Colombia cultivated under 100,000 hectares. Now it's more than double that. The trend began before Petro took office in 2022, but his administration has done little to stop it. Petro argues that legalization is the answer. If cocaine were legalized, part of the threat to the Amazon would disappear. He portrays prohibition as a failed policy. but Washington sees that as an excuse. Even though Petro claims record seizures, the record-high production figures tell another story. Meanwhile, powerful groups like the Gulf Clan operate freely, controlling entire regions with their own militias, tax systems, and illicit gold mining networks. These cartels have diversified trafficking gold, people, and drugs and are now better armed and organized than ever. They use semi-submersibles to ship cocaine worth millions, sometimes reaching as far as Australia. Many of these groups are linked to Venezuelan traffickers. This raises difficult questions. What role is Colombia really playing in the war on drugs? Is Petro genuinely aligned with Maduro? Are Trump's sanctions justified? Historically, Colombia has been Washington's key partner in Latin America's anti-drug efforts. In 2000, the U.S. launched Plan Colombia, a $14 billion aid package combining money, troops, helicopters, intelligence, and logistics. Coca cultivation fell by 70%, a major success. Petro, however, argues the U.S. profited while trampling Colombian sovereignty. But Plan Colombia did show that cooperation could work. Its most controversial elementarial fumigation of coca crops was halted in 2012 after public backlash, and by 2015 the program faded out. Coca production then skyrocketed again. Now, Petro's total peace strategy mirrors Mexico's hugs, not bullets approach under López Obrador, with equally poor results. Crime is rampant, and Petro focuses on negotiations, voluntary surrenders, and symbolic raids rather than dismantling cartels. It's not hard to see why. Cocaine accounts for over 4% of Colombia's GDP, and countless families depend on it for survival. Petro has even proposed legalizing cocaine, saying it should be sold like wine. But such plans seem unrealistic when armed groups still control production. Even more concerning, Petro recently signed agreements with Maduro to create binational economic zones along the Colombia-Venezuela border, the very region where most of Colombia's coca is grown. Critics see this as a potential narco-trafficking corridor rather than an economic development zone. Petro insists the alliance will help end drug trafficking by collaborating with a regime accused of running it. Washington, unsurprisingly, is skeptical. The contrast between Petro's diplomatic, conciliatory tone and Trump's hardline blow-thump approach couldn't be starker. Petro calls for peace talks. Trump sends missiles. Maduro, meanwhile, couldn't be happier. Colombia and Venezuela are one. Whatever happens to one, happens to the other. We are one single homeland. This kind of rhetoric alarms Washington. Whether or not Petro is personally involved in the drug trade, the cartels certainly seem pleased with his policies. To be fair, Petro may have valid concerns, such as questioning the legality of bombing suspected narco boats in international waters, which some U.S. lawmakers also criticized after civilian casualties, including a Colombian fisherman. Still, Petro's broader tone toward Washington is openly confrontational. He has blamed Trump for the Venezuelan migration crisis and accused the U.S. of hypocrisy. When Senator Lindsey Graham suggested possible U.S. military operations against narco networks in Colombia and Venezuela, Petro warned that many Colombians would take up arms and head to the mountains. While rejecting foreign intervention is normal, the veiled threats were alarming, especially given rising tensions. Then came more confusion. Petro claimed the US-Colombia Free Trade Agreement was suspended de facto, sparking panic in the markets until the Chamber of Commerce clarified that the deal remained in force. The truth is, the relationship between Colombia and the United States is now at its lowest point in 3 decades. Sanctions have hit Colombian officials and jeopardized hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. aid. If Trump follows through on his threats to impose 25% tariffs on Colombian goods, the blow to Colombia's economy could be devastating, fueling more poverty, despair, and, inevitably, more recruitment into the narco economy. Yet Washington also needs Colombia. Around 80% of the actionable intelligence used by U.S. agencies to intercept drugs in the Caribbean comes from Colombian security forces. Severing ties would be a serious setback for U.S. foreign policy goals. So far, the White House has focused on sanctioning Petro and his inner circle rather than cutting ties completely. But the future remains uncertain. Whether this is a point of no return or a temporary crisis will depend on how both leaders act in the coming months. For now, one thing is clear. The trust between Bogotá and Washington has been badly broken.